Somewhere between the cutting room floor and the final projection, something vanished. Not because of censorship boards or runtime constraints, but because someone somewhere decided a particular scene should no longer exist, and no one ever explained why. In the world of cinema, every frame is accounted for. Every second is budgeted, archived, duplicated. Studios don't simply lose footage, especially not after release. And yet, these 15 films once played in full. People saw them at premieres, in theaters, on early VHS and DVD editions. Some scenes even featured in trailers or press stills. But today, those moments are gone, erased, absent from all modern releases. No explanations, no restored version. Only the memory of those who watched and now question their own recollection. What makes it more disturbing is the nature of these missing scenes. They weren't throwaway gags or alternate takes. They were vital, emotional, sometimes violent, sometimes too revealing. In a few cases, they challenged a political narrative. In others, they tread too close to spiritual taboos. There are whispers that a few included real injuries, unapproved improvisation, or actors breaking character in ways that disturbed test audiences. Some studios claim the original negatives were lost in storage. Others don't even acknowledge the scene existed, but fans remember, critics reference them. And in rare cases, screenshots or foreign dubs hint at what was once there. This is not a list of director's cuts or unreleased edits. These are officially released films, distributed, reviewed, and documented, whose reels have holes no one can fill. And the deeper you look, the more those holes feel intentional. What was cut not by censors, but by fear. They were seen, remembered, discussed, and then they were gone. Not because of damaged reels or missing archives, but because someone, somewhere, decided that certain moments no longer belonged in the story, or worse, never should have been there in the first place. Each missing scene on this list was released, played, watched, reviewed, and yet today they live only in memories, whispers, still frames, and redacted call sheets. When a film loses a scene, it doesn't just lose time, it loses truth. And truth, in cinema, is never just an accident. So now we ask you, which of these scenes do you think was removed by necessity, and which were erased out of fear? Was it artistic judgment or historical erasure dressed in celluloid? Let us know what you remember, what you suspect, and what you believe never should have disappeared. And if you're still watching the shadows between frames, you're already one of us. The Passion of the Christ, 2004. The resurrection sequence that was quietly erased. Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ was as controversial as it was commercially successful. Released in 2004, it became the highest-grossing rated film at the time, praised and condemned for its graphic depiction of Christ's final hours. But buried beneath the debate is one scene that simply vanished. According to early reviews from private screenings in Rome and Los Angeles, the film originally included a longer resurrection sequence. In it, Jesus rises not in silence, but with a slow, echoing heartbeat sound, each beat growing louder as the tomb cracks with light. Then, a brief shot, Jesus stepping forward, not nude but wrapped in a translucent burial cloth, and whispering a single word in Aramaic. The word has never been confirmed. This scene was removed just weeks before the theatrical release. Gibson never explained why. In interviews, he claimed, "The resurrection was too sacred to depict." But sources close to the production say the footage was tonally different, more mystical than physical, closer to a vision than a literal resurrection. What's more, chilling. The footage appears nowhere in home releases. No deleted scenes, no director's commentary, nothing. Some believe the Catholic Church pressured Gibson to preserve mystery. Others think the studio feared accusations of sacrilege if the scene implied Christ's return was metaphysical rather than physical. But one question lingers. Whispered in the folds of a film that showed everything except what mattered most. Why would a film so willing to show the flesh refuse to show the spirit? Event Horizon, 1997. The extended hell tape that's nowhere to be found. Event Horizon is horror meets sci-fi meets damnation. Its most haunting image, the glimpse of the ship's first crew caught in a montage of mutilation known as the hell tape. But what fans saw was only a fraction. In Paul W. S. Anderson's original cut, the tape ran for 9 full minutes. Actors were body painted, suspended from ceilings, bound to spinning rigs, and filmed on high-speed cameras to create disorienting footage of torment. Several crew members recalled scenes so graphic they were physically ill during dailies. The studio panicked. Paramount demanded it be cut to under 1 minute. The removed footage was stored, and then lost. When Scream Factory attempted a full restoration in 2019, they discovered the original reels had been stored in a Transylvanian salt mine, but were decayed beyond use. Anderson called the sequence his descent into something real. Today, all that remains are scattered behind-the-scenes stills and one degraded fragment with no audio. What was on that tape that frightened even seasoned editors? And who benefits from it never being seen again? The Devils, 1971. The baptism scene that was buried by the church. Ken Russell's The Devils has always been a cinematic provocation. Based on Aldous Huxley's The Devils of Loudun, the film fuses religious hysteria, sexual repression, and political manipulation. But even in its most uncut form, it's still missing one infamous scene: the baptism of Sister Jean. According to early British Board of Film Classification documents, Russell filmed a sequence where Sister Jean, in a delirious vision, baptizes herself with Father Grandier's blood in the convent's desecrated chapel. The blood was from a wound on a statue. Jean licks it off her hands and weeps. The footage was submitted in 1971 and immediately rejected. Warner Brothers insisted it was destroyed. But in 2002, British archivist Mark Kermode claimed to have seen a rough VHS dub of the scene kept in a mislabeled canister. By 2004, the tape had vanished. The Vatican allegedly pressured distributors across Europe to never release the full cut. And unlike the notorious Rape of Christ sequence, eventually restored in part, this baptism scene has never reappeared. What line did Russell cross that even history tried to redact it? Rosemary's Baby, 1968. The hallway scene that dissolved into rumor. Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby is known for its psychological restraint showing less, suggesting more. But according to archival reports and early set notes, there was one scene intended to push beyond suggestion, a hallway sequence that might have revealed too much. In the original shooting script, Rosemary, already doubting her sanity, wanders the Bramfords' hallway at night. She pauses before a sealed door and hears a baby crying. In the final cut, this moment is absent. But according to cinematographer William Fraker, the sequence was shot in a distorted wide angle, with sound design mimicking a baby's cry merging into laughter. The scene was reportedly removed after preview audiences found it too literal, fearing it would lessen the ambiguity surrounding the cult. What's curious is that the sound design reel still exists, housed in the UCLA archives. But the footage itself is gone, not lost, not stored, gone. Polanski never spoke of the scene again, but Mia Farrow, in a 1981 interview, cryptically remarked, "We filmed something I still hear in my dreams, but no one ever saw." Did this missing hallway lead to a truth the film wasn't meant to show? Or is ambiguity only powerful when truth is just out of reach? Alien 3 1992. The autopsy sequence Fox pretends never happened. Alien 3 was a troubled production. David Fincher disowned it. Fans loathed the studio cut. But amid all the chaos, one sequence stands out, not for being in the director's cut or the assembly cut, but for being remembered only by extras and early viewers. In a limited UK test screening, there was a brutal, quiet autopsy scene. After Newt's body is cremated, Ripley, alone, performs an autopsy on a juvenile xenomorph corpse, one that never hatched. She cuts it open. Inside is a malformed, still-living parasite that writhes silently. She crushes it with her bare hand. No sound, no dialogue, just breathing. It's not in the theatrical cut, not in the special edition, not even referenced in Fincher's interviews. But a handful of early critics who attended that screening insist it was real and that it changed how viewers interpreted the film's timeline. Was it a last-minute addition Fincher wanted out, or something the studio felt would destabilize the franchise's logic? What happens when a missing scene explains too much? And that's precisely the problem? The Shining, 1980. The hedge maze footage that doesn't exist anymore. Kubrick appears again. During the filming of The Shining, he famously built an enormous hedge maze larger than any indoor set at the time. But here's the thing, it was too big for the few scenes we know today. Several photographs taken by crew members later pulled from official archives show scenes in the inner core of the maze. In one, Jack stands before a stone altar surrounded by animal-shaped hedges. In another, Danny kneels beside a figure in a bear suit, not the one from the hotel room but outside, in the snow. None of these moments exist in the film. None are listed in call sheets. But multiple crew members, including camera assistant Garrett Brown, admitted that Kubrick shot weeks of footage in the maze's interior, calling it a labyrinth inside the story. The mystery isn't just why it was cut, it's why it was destroyed. Warner Brothers has no record of it. The negatives were misfiled, and Kubrick, days before final delivery, reportedly demanded several reels never be duplicated. What did those hedge walls contain that couldn't survive the light? Eyes Wide Shut, 1999, the mansion sequence that was never logged. Stanley Kubrick's final film, Eyes Wide Shut, is already infamous for its shadowy edits, particularly the digitally altered figures in the orgy scene, added after his death to secure an R rating. But there's another scene that never made it to post-production logs, yet was definitely shot. An anonymous set worker revealed to Sight and Sound in 2000 that there was a much longer tracking shot of the masked ritual, one that followed a character not in the final film. The camera moved from the main chamber into a smaller adjoining room where a line of women waited in silence. At the center, a man in a black feathered mask whispered to each woman, one by one. His voice was never audible. The scene, according to the source, was filmed in a single floating take with no cuts. It took 4 days to perfect and then was never mentioned again. The footage wasn't included in any known negative. Not in the UK cut, not in the American rated version, not in the supposed uncensored European print. Was it Kubrick's final commentary on voyeurism and power? Or was it too close to something real? Why would a director famous for obsessive control erase his most elaborate sequence? Eraserhead, 1977, the industrial baby scene no one talks about. David Lynch's Eraserhead is a film of discomfort, but one scene, discussed only in hushed circles, seems to have disappeared without a trace. An extended moment in the factory where the baby was allegedly created. According to a brief passage in the out-of-print book Lynch on Lynch, there was a cutscene showing a conveyor belt of organic, writhing sacks, one of which bursts prematurely. The footage was supposedly shot on 16mm and later transferred for tests. It was deemed visually offensive, even by Lynch's standards. It never made it into any cut of the film. No known negatives exist. Lynch has denied it flatly. But several crew members have corroborated its existence, including assistant sound editor Alan Splett, who claimed in a 1981 interview that, "We pushed that one too far." Given Eraserhead's already intense tone, one has to wonder, what did that scene imply that even Lynch found unacceptable? And was it cut for mercy? Or because it revealed too much about the metaphor? The Exorcist 3, 1990. The dream sequence that was too biblical, William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist III already carries the scars of studio-mandated rewrites. But beyond the forced exorcism ending lies a dream sequence reportedly removed after initial previews. A cathedral set bathed in firelight, where Kinderman walks through rows of sleeping prophets, each murmuring a name. The footage was allegedly screened in a rough cut for internal WB execs in early 1989. Studio notes labeled the sequence theologically dense and confusing to the average viewer, but Blatty, a devout Catholic, had designed it as a metaphysical map of evil passed down one name at a time. Critics who previewed the scene in private described it as biblical horror done with Kubrickian chill. It was never publicly released. Storyboards exist. A few frame grabs surfaced in a 2007 documentary but were later pulled. Was it removed for pacing, or because it asked too many questions about who and what evil really is? The Thing, 1982, the child's blood test that was quietly abandoned. John Carpenter's The Thing is already legendary for its paranoia-fueled ending, but buried in its production notes and once mentioned in a Fangoria interview is a scene that would have shattered ambiguity entirely. A second blood test, this time on Childs. This version supposedly existed in one early screening cut, where Mac Reddy, before freezing, performs a final test on Childs using leftover supplies. The result? Inconclusive. The scene ends with both men sharing a glance not of trust, but of mutual uncertainty. Not present in the theatrical version, and not included in any home release, this moment lingers as a ghost, half remembered by crew and denied by Universal. Carpenter has offered cryptic responses over the years. At one convention, he simply said, "Some endings need to be missing to survive." Others, close to production, claimed it was cut after test audiences reacted poorly because it ruined the tension. Was it really ever filmed? Or was it written, read, and then buried? And if it was filmed, why has no still, no cell, no frame ever surfaced? Fight Club, 1999. The alternate phone call that slipped into only one version. David Fincher's Fight Club is no stranger to chaos, but even within its legacy, one scene has remained an urban legend. A different version of the phone call where Edward Norton's character first reaches out to Marla, one that played, reportedly, on certain international DVDs and has never been verified again. In this version, instead of Marla answering with her signature apathy, she pauses and whispers, "You called the police, didn't you?" The implication shifts dramatically. Instead of her being passive and fatalistic, she becomes aware, almost paranoid. It adds an entire layer of dread, suggesting Marla knew more than she let on, or was part of something deeper. The version was allegedly included in Region 4 Latin American discs for a short run. Collectors have searched for this cut, and while bootleg audio exists, no verifiable source has emerged. Why would such a subtle variation be pulled? Fincher's films are notorious for their editing precision. A scene like that would not have slipped through unless intended. So who replaced it, and why? Could it be that one whispered line threatened the entire ambiguity of the film? The Poughkeepsie Tapes, 2007, the abduction scene that disappeared after the festival circuit. John Eric Dowdall's The Poughkeepsie Tapes is a film that almost didn't exist. Shot in faux documentary style, it chronicles a fictional serial killer's archive of home videos. But for a while, the film was believed to be real because parts of it circulated before the full release, and one of those parts is now missing. At the Tribeca Film Festival, screening in 2007, several attendees recall a prolonged abduction sequence, a single take from a dashboard camera where the killer calmly narrates his process as he trails a young woman on foot for nearly 7 minutes. It ends abruptly as she turns around and the screen cuts to black. The sequence was uncomfortable, too real, and never appeared in the final version. Why was it removed? MGM refused to comment, even as bootleg versions of the film floated online for years. By the time the film officially released in 2014 on VOD, the scene was gone. Fans dissected early trailers and marketing stills, finding inconsistencies, backgrounds that don't appear in the final edit, hints of a longer timeline. Was it pulled because it blurred the line between fiction and snuff too effectively? Or did it risk legal trouble for how authentic it felt? Some call it a smart removal. Others call it censorship, masquerading as restraint. Can horror be too convincing for its own good? The Vanishing, 1988. The original ending that vanished twice. George Sluizer's Spoorloos, known internationally as The Vanishing, is infamous for its bleak, suffocating finale. But what's lesser known is that even this nihilistic masterpiece had one version, darker one, now lost entirely. And it's not just a rumor. According to early European promotional materials, the first theatrical prints included a post-credit scene, a brief, silent shot of Saskia's necklace hanging in the killer's car mirror, swaying as he hums softly. It was cut within a week of release, reportedly at the request of the distributor, who deemed it gratuitously cruel. The scene has never been restored in any home release, and no known prints include it. What makes this more curious is that Sluizer never acknowledged the removal. Some speculate it was intentional dissonance. The official ending was already disturbing. Burying it further might have crossed an invisible moral threshold. Others believe the distributor feared censorship backlash from the Dutch Film Board. But here's where it gets stranger. When Sluizer remade The Vanishing for American audiences in 1993, with a completely altered, Hollywoodized ending, that original cut necklace scene was briefly listed in a leaked edit log, meaning someone tried to reuse it. Why reinsert a removed scene into a fundamentally different ending? Or was it a placeholder never meant to be reused, but too symbolic to discard? Did the silence of that final image say more than the entire film dared to speak aloud? Gremlins 2, The New Batch, 1990. The Brain Gremlins broadcast that no longer exists. Joe Dante's Gremlins 2 is often remembered as a self-aware, anarchic satire, a chaotic sequel that broke the fourth wall and mocked studio expectations. But among its barrage of references and absurdity, one scene once stood out for being too coherent, too pointed, and it's now nowhere to be found. In early screenings and according to multiple audience members, a sequence aired where the Brain Gremlin hijacks a CNN-style news desk. He delivers a full, articulate monologue, not just about the superiority of the Gremlins, but about media manipulation, fear-based news cycles, and the dangers of sanitizing chaos for profit. It was dry, cold, eerily intelligent, and it rattled test audiences expecting slapstick mayhem. The theatrical cut replaced the scene with a much shorter, lighter moment. Brain Gremlin sings, "New York, New York," funny, memorable, but without teeth. Warner Brothers claimed the longer version was unfinished, But the original was broadcast during a late-night promo on cable in 1990 and later pulled. No copies have surfaced since, not in DVD extras, not on YouTube, not in international versions. What did that monologue really say? Some speculate it was an unsanctioned critique by Dante himself, using the gremlin as a proxy for chaos turned corporate. Others think it hit too close to home for studio executives funding the film. One line reportedly compared the gremlins to a product America sells back to itself, darker, funnier, and infinitely more honest. A satirical monster film losing its most insightful moment? It's not just ironic, it's suspicious. Was it too clever for its own good, or too honest to survive in a corporate comedy? The Keep, 1983, the scene that vanished before the fog cleared. Michael Mann's The Keep is remembered less for its story and more for the way it dissolves into incoherence. Released in 1983, this gothic war horror film was Mann's second feature and his most mutilated. Studio interference cut the film down from over 3 hours to just 96 minutes. But what's chilling isn't just what got cut, it's what no one can find anymore. For years, fans obsessed over one scene glimpsed in early TV promos, a moment where Father Finescu, the priest, wanders through a corridor filled with spectral Nazi corpses suspended midair as fog rolls backward, not forward, defying physics. It wasn't in the theatrical release, it wasn't in the VHS, and it doesn't appear in any known deleted footage. But it was aired, briefly, in a British TV trailer and then disappeared entirely. This missing sequence is more than visual flair. It recontextualized The Keep as not just haunted, but sentient, aware of those who entered it, reshaping itself accordingly. It also hinted that the entity inside Molasar wasn't simply evil, but a mirror of the trauma brought by the Nazis themselves. Removing that scene didn't just shorten the film, it severed its internal logic. Mann himself has never publicly confirmed the content of that missing sequence. The studio claims no extended footage exists, but stills exist. Eyewitnesses remember, and somewhere, in a vault mislabeled or perhaps deliberately misfiled, a reel might still hold what the world was allowed to see just once. Was this lost due to a rushed cut? Or because someone realized the film was saying something they didn't want it to? The Muppet Movie, 1979, the joke Disney pretends was never written. Not all missing scenes come from horror or controversy. Sometimes, they vanish because they're too sharp for the brand they represent. Case in point, The Muppet Movie, a whimsical, fourth-wall-breaking musical that became an unlikely casualty of corporate revisionism. During the film's original test, screening at a small theater in Pasadena, audience members recall a scene during the Movin' Right Along road trip sequence. Kermit and Fozzie stop at a gas station where a hitchhiker, played by a real actor, not a Muppet, asks, "You guys selling anything?" Fozzie replies, deadpan, "Just dreams, and they're non-refundable." The man walks away muttering, "That's what they told me in Vietnam." The scene got an uneasy laugh. It was never included in the theatrical release, and Disney, which acquired the Muppets decades later, has actively denied the line ever existed. No footage has surfaced. No script version contains the line. But puppeteer Dave Gonzo once mentioned in a 2003 panel, Jim Henson loved pushing the edge. That joke made him laugh harder than any other, probably why it didn't survive. A moment of dark irony. In a film about innocent pursuit, too real, too jarring, and too dangerous for the nostalgia machine. Was it just a joke too far? Or a moment of clarity the franchise couldn't allow?